Welcome to Yeukai Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host.
Hello everyone and welcome to the show. I'm Trevor Stockwell. And Spence Green, my guest today, helps businesses ensure that they're speaking their customers' language, literally, as well as bridging the language barrier between themselves and their potential clients and customers who has a different first language to themselves. Years ago, Spence interned at Google, where amongst other things he worked on the Google Translate app. Then back in 2015, he became the co-founder and CEO of Lilt, which provides machine-assisted language translation services. It blends AI and human input for accurate translation. Sounds good. He's here to share more about some of the challenges, how Lilt can help business owners, and a bit of life in general. So welcome to the show, Spence Green.
Hi, Trevor. Thanks for having me.
Great to have the opportunity to find out more about who you are as an individual. I know you're a very technical person with lots of years of experience, but also the business owner and how you got Lilt going. So maybe just to kick us off, I mentioned Google, but you've done a lot more than just work for Google. Share a little bit about your background and your journey that's brought you to where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I first got interested in language about 15 years ago. I was always into computers and software. I started programming when I was a kid. And then about 15 years ago, I was living in the Middle East. I'd moved there sort of after 9/11 because I was interested in that part of the world and trying to understand. I thought that region was going to be important in my lifetime. That's turned out to be true. And while I was there, I learned that in that part of the world, if you don't speak English, you make less money and you can't get the same jobs, which seems strange in Arabic-speaking countries that English proficiency is sort of the path to opportunity. But it turns out that this is the case in lots of parts of the world. And so right around that time is when Google Translate came out, and this was in 2006, and I got really excited about that, both as a really interesting problem and technology, but then also a technology that could have high social impact in the world. And so I left my job and went to grad school in 2008 to start working on machine translation research. And, as part of that, I spent some time at Google working on Translate, where I met my now co-founder. And the work that we did together over the course of about 5 years, we then commercialized as a company in 2015.
Wow, nice. That's really good. It's interesting, actually, what you say. Yeah, I mean, I'm a Brit. I speak English well, I speak a little bit of French, but don't really touch any other languages. So I'm very kind of one-sided in the sense of the language perspective. But I know where you're coming from. And I think one of the dangers, which we'll dig into in our discussion today, is that we can assume that because most of the world speaks English to some extent, and as you say, certain doors seem to open for you better if you can speak English even in other countries where it isn't necessarily the first language. We can become lazy and we can just assume that everything will be fine. But from a business perspective, you've experienced firsthand. And also this is how you address the issue that getting sort of a business's products into the native language, if that's the best term to use, or your client's preferred language, really makes a difference with regards to sort of sales, how well they communicate, and how well you connect, doesn't it? So I said all that really to premise it with, what's the biggest issue that you see from a approach for businesses? Why did you start Lilt, I suppose, is the short version of that.
I think that you can sort of convince yourself that the internet is broken in a way in that if you go to pretty much any company's website, you can prove this to yourself, go to pretty much any company's website, large or small, and to the extent that it offers any languages other than English, use the option to change it into another language. And I would wager that you can probably click no more than 3 links before you get out of that and back into English. So as an English speaker, imagine if your experience with the internet, imagine if your experience of buying a Japanese car, let's say, you get the car and it's sitting in the driveway, you've got your Toyota, you're so excited, you just spent a bunch of money to get this car, and you climb in and the LCD screen and all the gauges, they're all in Japanese. And you click the English option and then like half the gauges are in English and the rest are still in Japanese.
Yeah.
Sure, the car still drives, but you're probably not feeling like the most valued customer at that point. And that is the experience that many people who don't speak English have using the internet. And there's no good reason why that should be, other than we have the tools and the technology to solve that problem now. And so I think it's a real opportunity for businesses as they increasingly focus on digital customer experience coming out of COVID. Everybody's on the internet now. Everybody's life is digital now. Creating a customer experience that's highly personalized, like language is a component of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I like the way AI is growing all the time. A lot more people are starting to embrace aspects of it. There are still areas where it's not, I don't think it will ever be as smart as humans. I would say that I'm slightly biased being a human. There's a certain element it can't provide, I think, but just AI by itself hasn't solved the whole translation process, has it, or problem?
Yeah, that's correct. So I think for consumers, Google Translate is just an extraordinary innovation.
Yeah.
It used to be 10 years ago when you were traveling, you had to walk around with a little paper book with phrases, like trying to say words in another country. Now you just pull out your phone and take a picture of something and it'll translate it for you. And if you're browsing the web, you can click translate in Chrome and it'll just translate it for you. So that's really incredible. The key difference in business is you typically need a quality guarantee, either because it's a user manual for a piece of machinery. An example of one of our customers, big piece of heavy equipment that's used for construction, and you sort of need to know that that's translated correctly, or somebody's going to get hurt. Or because you have high brand aspirations, and when you sort of want to have a globally consistent projection of your brand, but you also sort of want it to be locally relevant. It's very difficult for machines to, they can't really give you a guarantee that they're right or they're wrong. It's also very difficult to encode some of that world knowledge that's not present in language. So it's the context that goes around a sentence, not necessarily what's expressed in the sentence, that informs how it's translated. And thus you have a need for people in some way to intervene in the process and ensure that the correctness guarantee exists. But that doesn't mean that you can't use machines to make the process more efficient and scalable, which is what we try to do. So the historical approach to this business service is entirely manual. It's labor-based, pay people to type things. On the other extreme end, you have the consumer solution, which is Google Translate, which is just click a button and you get a free translation, but you don't know whether it's right or it's wrong. The human in the loop approach, which is what we do, is somewhere in the center, trying to get benefits from both.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So is there, built into that, is there the sort of sensitivities around certain cultural words, phrases, like you mentioned? Context does play a big part in any communication. So is that factored into almost like the AI version that comes out, which is then it has that human touch before it gets out as a finished translation?
Yeah, let me give you an example. We have a customer that produces these sort of the company's called Canva, and they produce these design templates that people use for wedding invitations and greeting cards and business documents and presentations, all sorts of, it tries to be self-service graphic design. And so if you have a template that says, like, let's get margaritas at 5 p.m. and you're going to translate that into Arabic where it's going to be used in Riyadh, that doesn't really fit. So what's the equivalent? Okay, well, we're gonna get together at 5 p.m. at the coffee shop and smoke shisha or whatever. Yeah. And a human being can introduce that cultural conversion. And the unique thing about our technology is that it can learn. So it learns from what people do. And if it learns from the human being that happy hour translates to coffee shop hour in Arabic, well, the system will just learn that and it'll translate that way in the future. And so that's how you have this sort of symbiotic relationship between the people and the machine.
Yeah, no, that is really good. That is powerful. That's taking it to the next level, isn't it? Above, like you say, one thing on holiday to translate a menu maybe, or a road sign through Google Translate, but actually having documents, legal documents, contracts, even the promotion, marketing materials, in a way that that it's actually connecting with the end potential client or your end user. That's really powerful. So what are some of the dangers or the why are some of the reasons that we haven't maybe touched on that people should think about this more? For people listening, they're running a business, like, I can just focus on one language at the moment, really like to break into another territory, another country. I think there's a lot of options, and then they stop at a but. What would you say, what would be the argument to get them at least thinking a bit more that way if they've not taken the first steps?
Yeah, well, I think organizations, like people, operate usually in a first language. And so, your bias is to just continue to operate in that language and think that everybody else speaks that. You and I were just discussing, as an American and as a British citizen, we kind of have this reputation for thinking everybody speaks English, where in fact, there are 1.5 billion first and second language speakers of English in the world, and there are, 8 billion people, give or take, on Earth. So there's a lot of people that don't speak that language. And so for any organization that has a first language, the majority of the human population does not speak that language. So that simple recognition is important. And it's more important for organizations because, as you and I, as people, we don't have aspirations to speak to everybody in the world. But an organization that's trying to distribute a product or service on the internet usually does. And so therefore, making that a strategic priority is really all it takes, because, like I said, the tools and the technology exist to do it already, and have existed, at least the tools, which are just hiring people. You've been able to do that since, before agriculture or something. Now, what's new is that with these machine learning systems, we can make that massively more efficient. So you can raise your aspirations, whereas maybe for a fixed budget before, you could only afford to reach people in 3 or 4 different languages. Now you can do that in 15 or 20. And that's the amplification that you get from the technology.
That's amazing. Hopefully that's got everybody's attention that have been listening, if they weren't paying that close attention before, and I'm sure they were. But yeah, just suddenly being able to scale up your business to a much wider reach, because in effect it's the same product or service that you're offering, isn't it? But you're packaging it, or you're translating, I suppose, just it's the best way of putting it, into a language and into a way that makes it a lot more easier for them to connect with and receive and understand, really. Okay, this is what they do, this is why I need your product or your service. That makes a lot of sense. Share a little bit, we mentioned before we started recording about Stripe, and one of the things, some of the research that they found when they were looking into sort of e-commerce and communication issues with that, because I think that really makes the point well. Yeah,
there was a white paper last summer from Stripe that looked at failed e-commerce conversions in the checkout process. So when a checkout process stopped before a transaction occurred. And the top reason for that was that the conversion flow was not translated into the customer's language. It was counted for something like 70%, I think, was the number of failed conversions. So it was a very high fraction of them. And you can sort of think about this. This makes sense. If you're about to fork over some cash and you can't read all the details of what you're about to pay for, it's a little bit disconcerting. And so, that the argument then is make it possible when people are about to spend money, for them to have the confidence that the money they're about to spend, they're getting what they think they're going to get, and helping them read all the details of the transaction is a pretty good way to do that.
Yeah, definitely. It takes back to a few years back. I was on holiday, just landed, went to the car hire place, Portugal, I think it was. We love the Portuguese. This is nothing on them. But they gave me the contract, and the first paragraph was in English and the rest was just Portuguese. And I said, I don't know what I'm signing here. Where's the English version? Or, And they said, well, there's Google Translate. That was their exact words. It's great. So all the small print, I'm supposed to sit there and translate with Google Translate. So I understand from that perspective, just frustrating, but also, like you said earlier, I feel less valued as a welcome customer because you're not accommodating my limitations, I suppose, really is a good way of putting it. It's almost like I need your help to help me understand that what I'm signing on the paper for, agreeing to, is actually what I'm after.
That's right.
that's the rule of business, isn't it? If we're not giving the customer what they're hoping they're buying, then they're not going to come back. They're not going to stay as loyal customers. They're certainly not going to tell all their friends what an amazing experience they had. Are they? So,
that's right. Yeah.
That I think you've already mentioned that Lilt helps businesses it makes it more affordable for businesses to speak their client's preferred language if it isn't in their native one, but also just the whole connection, the relationship. It's a higher percentage that businesses have from returning customers than new customers generally. So it's like, why are we not doing a lot more to make sure that once we get the clients, we're actually keeping them, and we know that we're keeping them for the right reasons? So it's a really important service that you're offering. Maybe I'm kind of curious as well. I always want to chat to business owners just to hear some of the challenges that you've overcome when you sort of started launching Lilt to start with, or maybe did you try before and it didn't work out, you learned from it and then you started again? Just because I know people listening, we're all on a journey, we all have challenges, we make mistakes, things don't work out as we imagine, but we don't want to give up. And we always try and encourage listeners to keep going, to press on. But it's always nice to hear when people have overcome stuff and what they've learned from it.
Yeah, gosh. We to characterize our business as having a slow start would be an understatement. We changed the business model 5 times before we figured out how to make the business work. And it mostly is to do, I think there are kind of 2 factors. The first is there's a relatively complex global supply chain that serves businesses right now with translation services. And it's got a pretty high degree of structural resistance to change. And so we tried intervening at various points in that supply chain, and we could not, we would add value at one link, but then that's mitigated by dysfunction at either the upstream link or the downstream link. And so the breakthrough was vertical integration, which is let's just own the whole supply chain, which is a cleaner solution, but is also operationally a lot more complicated, and thus has required us to internalize a lot of the complexity that had sort of been distributed in this supply chain. And the other factor is that you can think of this industry like it's been a business service for a long time, of people, producing effectively what is a boutique service. And anytime you're trying to sort of modernize what is effectively an industry that's an artisan guild, there's a lot of resistance to change. And so in our view, using more automation is the right thing for humanity, because it's obvious that the amount of information that's being produced in the world, information is being produced faster than people are being produced. That's an obvious statement. So there are not enough people to throw at this problem. Therefore, you have to use some technology. But that scares people for whom a highly labor-based approach has been the way of life for a very long time. So I think part of our job has been sorting out some of the complexity in supply chain so that we can add more value for customers, because ultimately it's customer value that we're trying to deliver as a business. Businesses exist to serve a customer need. But then secondly, of all these stakeholders within the supply chain, aligning incentives such that we can achieve this future that we want, which is a truly multilingual future, it may seem to some people that that's not in their best interest when actually, it is in the interest of our species, I think. And so that has just taken a lot longer and cost a lot more than we ever thought that it would. And we're certainly not a successful company yet, but we're on our way, and we figured out how to make the the whole sort of integrated supply chain with technology that we've built, that is working now.
Well done. No, that's really good. I guess in lots of ways, by doing it that way, you have more control, but the risks are higher because there's more moving parts within the bit that you...
That's exactly the trade-off.
Yeah.
And vertical integration is not a rational strategy for all markets or all types of products. But I'm convinced that for this particular service, the only way to achieve the factor improvement in efficiency that's required, I think vertical integration is the only way to do it.
There's a lot of unlearning or changing the approach, like you say, for how people view business and certain elements to it and how they interact. Yeah, I know where you're coming from on that one. So at the moment, how many translations or how many different languages does Lilt cover? Is there a roadmap to add on X amount over the next however long, or how does it work for people listening that are thinking, I need to look into this a bit more? Where's Lilt and how can it help them?
The short answer is we'll do any language that our customers ask for. So we have about 70 languages in production right now, which you can count on one hand the number of businesses that translate in more than 70 languages. So that covers most of the economy. And if there are idiosyncratic or more rare languages that people need, that customers need, we will build teams and build systems for that. But I think at this point, it's rare that a business presents a case that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, that's really good. Maybe just for people that are listening, thinking, you're not quite convinced me yet.
Okay.
Or they're thinking, they're overwhelmed thinking, I've got to translate everything I do now to reach another thing. What would be maybe the first step? Maybe this is a new subject for people that haven't really thought about, I need to throw that into the mix of things that I'm strategizing for the next 6 months, year, whatever, within the business. What would be maybe some of the first steps to avoid the overwhelm and just switching off and closing their business down to just who they operate with at the moment? For those that are aspirational to reach, world domination or whatever that looks like for them, because everything starts with one step and then the next and then the next, doesn't it? So what would be some of the easier things for people to think about to then start taking action on at some point?
Yeah, I don't think it's actually pretty straightforward. Where you should start is do an audit, and you can just, like I mentioned, go to your own website or any digital property and change it to another language and then start clicking around. And if you are disappointed by what you see, which I would suspect that many listeners would be, then you've got the second question to ask is like with any business question, is fixing that is a strategic imperative. And I think the reason that it is like that I know the reason it is like that in most businesses is because most businesses take a very tactical patchwork approach to language in the following way. And I'm speaking specifically for digital businesses that are on the internet. Usually the sales team or some go-to-market team says, we gotta sell in Japan. We need, the landing page in Japanese, and we need a couple of support articles in Japanese. And so somebody goes off in the business and figures out how to do that. And that's produced, and it's sort of a point in time. Well, then the business keeps running. All of the English content keeps changing as the business runs, and the Japanese diverges from the English. Yeah. And then it becomes, well, now what do we do? And that's where not having a strategic approach leads to fragmentation. The other thing that's slightly more subtle is that every digital business today is using lots of different software products. And from the customer's point of view, if they come to your website, they hit the content management system, then maybe they click log in to go into the app, and they move from the content management system into the product. Then maybe they get into the product and they want to buy something, and they move off of that into like Stripe, and they go through a checkout flow. Then maybe they get confused, so they click support and they end up in a knowledge base, and they're traversing different business systems. To them, it's just one view of the company. But internally, operationally, there are 4 different business systems that they just went through. And if these are not all sort of synchronized in terms of language, then you can also get fragmentation just by the customer hopping across business systems. And this is where the problem comes from, and where a strategic solution is to have something like what we offer, which is a platform that hooks all those systems together and makes the customer experience consistent.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's surprising just from us 1 or 2 clicks. It's just another page. But no, the back end of that is a completely different app a lot of the time, isn't it? So
that's right.
That's a really good
That's exactly right.
So for people then, what's the Lilt process for somebody that thinks, right, I've been listening to Spence, I want to take the first step. What does that look like from a hi Spence, can you help me kind of approach? Duration wise, involvement, amount of their time? I know that's quite difficult because businesses are different sizes, different requirements, but just a ballpark general estimation.
Yeah, translation is it's a interesting product to buy because you can't often, the customer gives us a document, we give them the document back in 20 languages, and they can't read what we did. So it's kind of a strange product to buy and evaluate. And so our approach is to do a proof of concept. So you can contact us through our website, and we'll set up a sample production project for you. We'll go through the whole process of setting up the technology, taking your brand guidelines and converting those into guidelines for other languages, putting people from our community, our language community, on the project, and we'll go through and we'll prove that the business service works. I mean, I've said a bunch of stuff in this call, but ultimately it's a service, and it's a little bit harder to evaluate a service than it is of an actual product, like evaluating a piece of software. Yeah. And so we have a process whereby we go through proving the value of the service, and I think we can do that. And then we kind of go from there. And the business model, it's a consumption-oriented business model, meaning you pay for what you use. So there's no real upfront cost for getting started. And the economics of the pricing depend on how much you spend. So if you spend a lot of money with us, we give you pretty steep discounts. If you don't spend much money, then you pay a higher price. That's how it works.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That sounds reasonable as well. You've made it a lot more accessible for businesses to even start thinking about it. As you say, the whole world is connected a lot more now. People are a lot more used to connecting with people in different countries, different languages, different cultures. So it's only the need for correct language translation is only going to get greater, isn't it? So you're in a good place to offer a way of supporting business owners. This has been really good. We need to sort of wrap it up there, but just as we do, next steps for somebody listening, head to lilt.com. Is that the best way to touch base with you? There'll be a link below wherever people are listening to this, but is that the best way to sort of reach out or find out what you're doing?
That's exactly right. Lilt.com, and then there's a button you can click to connect with somebody on our team.
Okay, brilliant. So somebody there could answer any questions that maybe have come from our chat today that we haven't covered. They can sort of sound them out and then get a little bit more clarity if they need to on something. So
that's exactly right.
Perfect. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Spence, for your time. Thank you for bringing this service to the marketplace. It is very needed, and it does make reaching bigger territories wider, making wider influence for people a lot better. Even if you're a small business, you don't have to stay small, do you? That's the beauty of it. So, sounds really good. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you again for your time. For everybody listening as well, just think back on what we've been chatting about. Evaluate where you are on the scale of, are you reaching the market that you want to? Are you just reaching people that understand you? But is there gold in another market that you can really serve if you make that connection with them through the right languages, through the right approach culturally as well? Maybe you have to think about it for a little while, throw it into the business plan and the strategy going forwards, but it's definitely worth thinking about. You don't want to be one of those businesses that gets left behind. All of Spence's customers will jump on and progress their businesses. So you don't want to be one that isn't like that. We don't get commission, so I'm not promoting Spence like that. But just think about it from the future of your business. That's what I'm trying to get you to think about. What are the practical steps you could take now to assimilate what Spence has shared, what they offer to progress and grow your business, to reach the people that you want to reach? Brilliant. That's plenty for everyone to think about. I will certainly be thinking about it more as well. We'll wrap it up for now, but thanks again, Spence. Appreciate your time with us today. And for everybody listening, make sure you take action and at least think about the first steps that you need to take. Head over to lilt.com, find out a bit more. We've only touched the surface really of what their service offers, but find out a little bit more, and then you can make an informed decision on what's best for you. That's it for now. Thanks for joining us. We will catch you next time.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you for listening to Yeukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yukaibusinessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.